The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, greetings from Minneapolis, everybody. Come to you cordless. It's Monday night, August 18th, 2025. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is show number 266. Mark your cards. Now, we started a minute late because I'm 69 years old, and I'm just about to push the button to start the sequence to put us on the air, and I realize I have to pee. Well, that only took a minute. So we started a minute late. Our guest tonight is Jonathan Lockwood, military historian, strategist, former U.S. Army colonel. We bring him on regularly to explain military stuff to him, and specifically what's going on with the war in Ukraine over the last weekend and today. So we're going to talk about that. I got us basically an extended Jimcast tonight afterwards. Man, there's a lot of crazy crap going on, and we're going to discuss it. No calls tonight. Wednesday night, I'll get to that in a second. Tomorrow night, our guest is Salvador Litvak. He's the producer and director of the independent film hit Guns N' Moses. And he was on a couple months ago, and the film has come out. It's been a huge hit, but they've had distribution problems. So they're kind of rebooting. It has a 97% score on Rotten Tomatoes. Seriously, you can't do any better than that. So the people, considering the run they've had in the theaters, it's been very well attended. But because I guess they got crowded out because of the Superman movie or something, they're rebooting the run. And so I think if I'm right, it's going back in theaters on September 7th, I think it is. Anyway, Sal's going to be on tomorrow to talk about. He is he's also a comedian, stand-up comedian. So he is of good humor, as you might imagine. Wednesday, our old friend, bail bondsman, extraordinaire, and Bigfoot investigator Larry Newman's joining us, and we'll talk about a lot of Bigfoot sightings lately. Matter of fact, there's some guy who says he has a Bigfoot skeleton or something, and this never pans out. Have you noticed this? The people say they have this stuff and never pans out. Now, when what's the guy's name? It's on the tip of my tongue. The Mexican guy who brought those two skeletons into the Mexican parliament, who said they were extraterrestrials. Believe it or not, that's still kind of up in the air. I said this is an obvious fake. The guy's name is Jesse Marsan, I think is his name. He's so flaky, and he's done so many flaky things. I just assumed it was bullshit. But there's people who've looked at these skeletons and said, no, maybe it's not. So I don't know. That's still up in the air. I just assumed it was bullshit. So I was surprised. They said some American scientists went down there to look at it, and they said they ran DNA tests, and no, it's odd. So I don't know. We'll see. That guy, he's made so many false claims that I don't think he can be trusted at this point. And that's the same with the Bigfoot people. There's skeletons, there's corpses. It never ever pans out. So I don't know. Anyway, Larry's on Wednesday. Now, starting on Thursday, we're taking 12 days off for the Labor Day holiday. We're coming back here on Tuesday, September 2nd. So a whole week and then a couple days and and the Labor Day holiday, of course. We already have our guest for September 2nd. That's Jared Knott, who's written 2 books called Tiny Blunders and Big Disasters. I bought them before we even booked this guy. They're just fascinating books about little things in history that have gone wrong, that have led to really, really major consequences, usually disastrous. And also him and a guy named Scott Walter, who wrote the book Arabella, the dark money network of leftist billionaires secretly transforming America. He's talking about a group called Arabella Advisors, which apparently is basically like a George Soros-led organization that's causing most of the havoc in the United States, and they're doing it completely clandestinely. So he's coming on too. That's on Tuesday, September 2nd. All right. I'm going to play 12 minutes of a bumper here, and then Jonathan Lockwood's going to come on and talk to you. It's going to be fascinating. Joining us from his home in Reston, Virginia, the dominant and all-powerful Jonathan Lockwood.
Well, I wouldn't raise myself to demigod status just yet. I don't want to. I don't want to offend. I don't want to offend. You know who up there.
Yeah, well, that's my job.
Yeah, your job. Okay,
yeah,
very
right.
good.
That's right.
You'll take the divine lightning bolt.
Yeah, that's right. I will, and I have. Now, show people your T-shirt.
Well, now I'm not going to stand up and show you the whole T-shirt.
Okay,
but if you had to guess,
hold it, Jonathan. You have pants on, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, good. Because you shouldn't be on television with pants.
Yeah, really. It's weird being the same age as old people.
I was telling you before we went on the air. My mom is 101. She just moved into assisted living facility, and her big bitch is that all these old people don't do anything.
That's exactly right.
She's the only person in the building. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
You and I are the same age, essentially.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, and the thing is, as I've said to my wife, Kathleen says, "Well, we're this age now. We don't feel old. We don't. I think we should. You think there's some magic threshold that you cross. Once you cross a certain age, you're starting. Hey, I've got one foot in the grave. I just want to die." Yeah, no. If you have a positive attitude and you have a sense of purpose in life, you never feel old.
Yeah. Now, speaking of purpose, I think Donald Trump has a purpose in life.
Oh, you better believe it. Because again, and this is I find it very difficult to argue with his perspective, because apparently a number of people have told him that he was spared twice from assassination in order to fulfill God's larger purpose for his life.
Right.
And as a Christian myself, I find that next to impossible to disagree with.
Same here. I can't argue with that either.
Because, actually God spared me from dying of cancer 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Over 3 years ago. So, and my wife Kathleen told me at the time, God has spared you for a larger purpose.
Yeah.
And so, and so I understand directly exactly where President Trump is coming from. And now he is acting with a sense of purpose rarely seen in modern times. A sense of purpose and drive. He is not taking his foot off the accelerator as far as trying to get things done during his second term, because he realizes that this is where he makes his mark on history. And
hey, Jonathan,
yeah.
It sounds like I'm off topic, but I'm not. How come so few people can get anything done? It's like, okay, so I'm in the last 40 years since Reagan, I would argue, and I know that a lot of people, especially like conservatives, won't like exactly what I'm going to say here. I would argue that the only two presidents that have been really disruptively successful are Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. And
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, right. No, you go ahead. Why is that?
Well, Bill Clinton was disruptively successful in that once his initial agenda was thwarted by the Republican takeover of the Congress, thanks to the Contract of America in 1994, when the Republicans regained control and broke Democratic control of Congress for the first time in about 40 years.
Right, that's right.
And I remember watching Rush Limbaugh on his when he had late night TV show, and the night that happened, he was dancing around the studio shouting, "It's over! It's over!" Yeah, he had a good point, but interestingly enough, Bill Clinton did have, to his credit, the wisdom to reach across the aisle,
Yes, right.
work with Newt Gingrich, and people. Not many people remember this, but they would probably look on it with nostalgia now. That by the end of the century, the working with they had a balanced
That's
budget.
right. We had a balanced budget.
Balance, and surpluses. We were generating budget surpluses.
The first time in like 70 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and people were talking about being able to whittle down the national debt and start paying it off in a serious way. And the national debt was a lot smaller back then too.
Right.
So, but then unfortunately, in my perspective, we got suckered. After the 9/11 attacks in September 11th. We got suckered into a so-called war on terror.
Yeah. So I'm sitting home in my underwear here in Minneapolis, Jonathan, and Dick Cheney gets on the tube or something like that, and George W. and they say, "Well, we need to attack Iraq." And I'm thinking, what? Huh? What did that have to do with anything?
Yeah, and Iraq and Afghanistan. And the thing that bothered me was that, remember, in Operation Desert Storm, 1991, George Bush Sr., basically Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait and occupied it, and President George Bush had put together a coalition to essentially knock Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. And in a very decisive 100-hour operation, it was done. And people were wondering, well, why don't you go on to Baghdad? Why didn't they finish the job, so to speak, and go on to Baghdad and essentially occupy Iraq? And because President Bush Sr. had arguably the best resume for a president in history.
Absolutely.
He had it all, and it was just incredible resume. If you look at him,
that guy died with more secrets in his head than any person probably who's ever lived on the planet.
In all likelihood, I would not argue with that either. Yeah. And the reason that he gave for not going to Baghdad was this, and he quotes this: he did not want to get caught in the middle of a civil war. Very wise reason for not pushing it. Just accomplished it, and it is a pity that his son didn't take heed of his father's example,
right?
Because he got suckered into the war that George Bush Sr. avoided.
Yeah,
and as a result, we ended up in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we expended many American lives needlessly. We could have used other means to pursue Osama bin Laden. We could have used special forces and just concentrated on a low-level covert campaign to take him out quietly and focus on that, rather than getting involved with invading two countries, which really we had no business being in.
Yeah.
And so, but that, be that as it may, we have the current situation. President Trump is, whatever else you want to call him, you cannot call him inconsequential. You cannot call him irrelevant. And for better or for worse, and I would argue that overall it's for the better. There are going to be people who disagree with what his means are, but the majority of the American people support what his goals are, and he is keeping his campaign promises.
The polls that just came out today, about the weekend, the numbers for the president are hugely up. The public is very impressed. Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, my Ukrainian co-hosts on tomorrow's Ukraine show, we're going to be discussing the implications of the things that were apparently agreed to today. And there's a lot of emphasis on the security guarantees that are supposedly going to be set up.
I got two things here, Jonathan. I'm going to cut you off because we don't mention your podcast enough. So, and that's kind of your claim to fame here. You guys, you have a podcast with three guys on it, and you do it twice a week. But the one real thing about your podcast is that you actually have one of the three guys is actually in Ukraine. That's the real cool thing about it. And
our man on the spot.
Yeah, you have the only podcast where this is true. You actually have a person over there. So is it just called the Ukraine Show? Is that what it's called?
It is called Ukraine, Russia, China.
Yeah.
Because it focuses on those three countries right now, because of the Ukraine war, it had really been Ukraine, Russia. Yeah,
And
China gets mentioned because of they support Russia, and we
right.
talk about the implications of that.
And where can people see this?
It's now let's see. I can send you a. I would have to. I'm new at this, relatively new at this, but I would have to. It's IBM TV/Pod TV.
Okay.
That's the network.
Right.
And basically, if they can look that up, they can probably find that on the link, and then they can basically link up there, and I can send you for yours. I can send you a link of the email address of the producer there, who can then inquire and get on board and actually view broadcasts of the Ukraine Russia China show. Then they are every Tuesday and Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But those programs our program is, in fact, yes, the only one that focuses like a laser beam on the Ukrainian war.
Right. And we're gonna try to have all three of you guys on after the Labor Day break. We'll see.
I'm gonna negotiate with them tomorrow and send them emails and say, hey guys, what do you think? So let's do this.
Oh, but I do want to ask you about
Yes.
So this is one of my primary questions here. One of the things that's come out today is that, and I'm a little confused about this. So apparently Putin and Trump talked about security guarantees for Ukraine, but they were talking, there's a difference between a NATO guarantee and a NATO style guarantee.
Right.
And
That's a level of ambiguity that I'm somewhat uncomfortable with.
Yeah. Could you explain what the difference would be, first of all?
Okay. The NATO guarantee, that Article 5. Article 5 basically stipulates that an attack against one NATO member is an attack against all. Former Secretary of State Clark Clifford, way back, defined it like this. He said, NATO essentially said to the Soviet Union, attack any one of the NATO member states, and you have attacked the United States, and you are at war with the United States. That is about as unequivocal a deterrent as you can get. Attack any NATO member, you might as well have just directly attacked Washington. And so that was a very powerful deterrent. And what we have here now is, now they aren't, because you can't have Ukraine admitted to NATO because Ukraine is at war currently with another state, i.e. Russia. And the NATO charter prohibits admitting a member that is currently at war with another state. So instead of this, they are trying to sort of square the circle by creating a NATO-like security guarantee. In order to do that, you have to get to a ceasefire, and you also have to back up that ceasefire and the freezing of the current lines with you can't just set it and forget it. You just can't have that agreement in place and then not pay attention to what's going on. You have to have it backed up by solid military force, by continuing to reinforce Ukraine with military aid. You have to continue having that threat of economic pressure against Russia in order to try and keep them honest. There has to be a set of very complex arrangements, which cannot all be discussed in public. You have to keep them classified to a certain extent.
Right.
And in order to do that, it's a very delicate mechanism. Diplomacy by itself cannot solve anything. It has to be backed up by military power. Otherwise, nations like Russia can just ignore the thing with impunity. And right now, Vladimir Putin is thinking that he can just continue to wage war against Ukraine and not be punished for it. President Trump is reacting with, he can bring economic sanctions, continue to produce energy and oil, continue to try to drive the price of oil down, which hurts Russia and their ability to fund the war. He can continue to send military weapons, more and better military systems to Ukraine. As a matter of fact, Ukraine has just offered to get a $150 billion deal with the United States to purchase $150 billion worth of weapon systems that Ukraine needs, and to do for them, basically, the United States would sell these to European countries, which in turn would give these to Ukraine. So it's a complex set of arrangements, but it is one which is potentially very effective. The problem with this entire thing is it is not low maintenance.
Uh-huh.
It is not something that you can just once you get the agreement in place, President Trump collects his Nobel Peace Prize, and no. It has to be maintained and watched very carefully, and supported very carefully.
Well,
Go ahead. Yeah.
So, it's obvious that the Russians aren't going to go for NATO protection, but would they acquiesce to this NATO, quote unquote, NATO style protection? Would they?
That's the central question, and that is one which we do not know the answer to yet. We do not know whether Vladimir Putin will be satisfied with a sort of temporary halt or cessation of overt hostilities in order to. Well, what does he gain from it? Well, theoretically, he could build up his forces, try to recover his economy, make sure that he's got more. But his whole history of behavior has been that he has been at war for much of his tenure as president of Russia, and he is in a position right now where he cannot afford to halt the war, nor can he really afford to continue the war. He's been caught out in the middle of a Texas hailstorm. He can't hide, he can't run away, and he can't make it stop.
So you think he has some considerable impetus to actually want to end this thing, right?
He wants to end it on his terms.
Right. Okay, so now I have to ask you
his terms are quite punitive.
Yes, the idea of Ukraine joining NATO is going to be completely off the table, right? That's not right.
For him, that's completely off the table. No,
right. That was one of the major things. All right, so now they've been talking about the Donetsk region, and right now, Russia controls most of it, right? Not all of it, but most of it.
Russia controls most of the Donetsk region, but they don't control the critical portions which make up the strong defensive line that Ukraine has created there, which the Russians have been trying to take it for 2.5 years nearly, and they've lost tens of thousands of their soldiers trying to take it, and they can't because the Ukrainians have a very solid defensive position there, and they have been able to defeat Russian military forces there time and time again, and this is And in addition to that, Ukraine, now that they have permission to strike deep against Russian logistical infrastructure, oil refineries, and various other aspects of the Russian economy, it is putting increasing pressure on Russia and steadily decreasing their ability to conduct offensive military operations against Ukraine. And some observers have concluded that before the end of this year, Russia will have exhausted its resources for being able to successfully prosecute offensive operations. I would argue that before that even occurs, that on our Ukraine program, I have argued consistently that the true center of gravity of this entire conflict is the Crimea. And the Ukrainians have been able to successfully attack the Kerch Bridge. The Kerch Bridge is the bridge which links logistically and for reinforcements Russia's path to Crimea. The Ukrainians have managed to successfully attack it several times, and if they can attack it in such a way that it permanently destroys or disrupts the Kerch Bridge, then the Russians that are currently occupying Crimea will be isolated from reinforcement and resupply. At that point, assuming that the Ukrainian military has reserve forces prepared for this, the Ukrainians could launch a counteroffensive, which could take out and enforce the surrender of Russian-occupied Crimea.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to stop you.
Sure.
So But Russia's controlled Crimea for over 10 years, right? This predates this war, correct?
Right.
I mean, so the assumption is, the assumption I have, and I think a lot of other people who are involved in this have, is that Crimea is kind of a done deal. If the way this is going to end up, Russia will end up with it, right?
Well, that's the way a lot of people in the West are assuming. But
I have to ask you something else too. Why does Russia want Crimea so bad? What's going on there? Is it they're native Russians, or what's the deal?
Well, Crimea, for one thing, has been a favorite vacation spot.
Okay.
It's got wonderful climate.
That's
the former Soviet Union, Crimea was the place to go. It would be the vacation spot to go. Wonderful climate.
Palm Springs of the East.
Yes. There you go. It's and the Russians are very fond of Crimea, and it's also very strategically located in the Black Sea.
Right. What's the thing with Donetsk? Why do they want Donetsk so bad?
Okay, Donetsk, it occupies a central portion, terrain-wise. It's very hilly. Okay, and the Ukrainians have been able to construct a very powerful defensive line anchored on the Donetsk region, and that has been effectively blocking any major Russian advance into Ukraine for the past 2.5 to 3 years. And what happens is, if you are able to get possession of Donetsk, what is to the west of Donetsk? Flat land, not hilly terrain, not easily defensible at all. But if they have the complete possession of Donetsk, any subsequent Russian offensive would be very easy for them to prosecute, because they'd be advancing across very open terrain. And the Ukrainians know this, which is why they have built that powerful defensive line. That effectively stops any serious Russian advances and enables Ukraine to defend that area with many fewer troops than would otherwise be required. So yes, as what Putin is trying to do is to gain through diplomatic negotiation what he cannot gain on the battlefield. The Ukrainians have been successfully thwarting the Russian army on the battlefield for over 3 years.
Am I right about the fact, Jonathan, that most of the people who live in Donetsk are Russian nationals? Is that correct?
Well, a lot of them were Russian nationals, but there's a sufficient number of Ukrainians there, especially near that anchored defensive line, to where there is no way that that Putin can effectively appeal to the Russians that are in that area, because really the Ukrainians outnumber them. So this is a very thorny problem for Putin, and that is why he has been using these peace talks as just like a weapon of war. He's trying to gain through those negotiations what he cannot gain through military victory. And President Trump, for his part, he realizes, he's been steadily coming to realize just how difficult a person Putin is to negotiate with, because heretofore he has been thinking in economic terms. He's thinking everyone is open to good economic deal. He's been able to persuade people using the economic incentives to do this, and economic and trade incentives. But in Putin's case, Putin only understands one type of currency: power.
Hey, Jonathan, let me just ask a really blunt question. Do you think Putin's nuts?
Putin, not in the classic sense of nuts. He is obsessed. He is obsessed he sees himself. He sees himself as the reunifier of the Russian Empire. He has his fantasy. He wants to be remembered as the person who restored the Russian Empire to its former glory.
Yeah, I understand.
There have been many stories about how he has ambitions beyond Ukraine.
He said many times that the dissolution of the Soviet Union was the single worst political catastrophe of the 20th century. I mean, he said, and he's actually, in some ways, he's right. I can't really disagree with that. I mean, it's like, can you imagine, like, the United States, all of a sudden we weren't the United States anymore, and just 50 states off on our own? I mean, yeah, that'd be pretty weird. You know?
Yes, it would. And but yeah, yeah. And if he was going to say it was the greatest disaster of the 20th century, yeah, I would be tempted to. I would be inclined to retort, "For you, maybe, not for the rest of, not for the rest of the
Well,
world.
that's right.
The rest of us were busy celebrating. Sorry about that."
That's right. That's right. And when I asked it if he was nuts, I certainly didn't mean to imply that he's stupid, because I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's pretty obvious he's not stupid.
No, no, he's not. He's not stupid, but he is obsessed with a particular goal, and he has a mindset that is very alien to that which President Trump is used to.
Yeah.
President Trump can usually find common ground using economic arguments and arguments for prosperity.
Right.
Not with Putin. Putin has a command economy. He can have whatever. You can't bribe Putin with economic benefits. He can take whatever he wants. He's a dictator.
I mean, I knew this, but there's an article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago about the fact that Putin's probably the richest single person on earth.
Right. Not because he didn't earn it through capitalistic means. He just took it.
He took it. That's right. Yeah.
Of course.
So I mean, I saw pictures of that house he has. It's like it's unbelievable. He has a house that's twice as big as Buckingham Palace. I mean, it's like mind-boggling. All right. What do you think is going to happen here? Okay, so right now it looks like what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, Zelensky and Putin and Trump are going to meet somewhere. So what do you want to make a prediction how you think this is going to go down?
Well, that's going to be a real fascinating, and I would be Zelensky during that period of time. Zelensky has an opening. And I've talked about this potential several times on the Ukraine show. Ukraine still has one more card that it can play independently, and Ukraine doesn't have to tell anyone else about this. But if they launch that counteroffensive that I mentioned, that severs the Crimea or isolates Crimea, destroys the Kerch Bridge, that's a major military event, and that is something where most Western analysts would say, "Oh no, that's not possible." Well, I got news for you. It's the can't ever happen events that change the course of history.
Yeah.
And
the other thing is
Ukraine has shown time and again during this war that they are capable of executing operational surprises.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. I mean, a lot of people thought when this started it was going to be over in 2 weeks. And here 3 years later, they're still putting up a pretty good defense. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. So let me ask you, you're the military historian and expert here. Is that because the Ukrainian army is so brilliant, or because of the Russian army so relatively incompetent? Why is that?
Combination of you just mentioned the two combined reasons. Number one, the Ukrainians have a great deal of ingenuity and cleverness and a willingness to innovate and develop their own defense industry to a degree. I mean, for example, the Ukrainians, with their development of drone technology, they are teaching the American military some very valuable lessons, and we are trying to learn from that. That's a rarity for the American military to find themselves being schooled by a nation that they thought wasn't really that capable of defense. But the Ukrainians have taken this to the next level and showing a degree of cleverness that is to be admired. And they've even used the Patriot system more effectively than we thought possible, and integrated it into their ballistic missile defense. So this is it's a fascinating. The Ukrainians have shown that they can be a very valuable ally, and we should not cast them aside or allow them to simply become a Russian vassal state, because, as a matter of fact, the Russians would just as soon see Ukraine cease to exist as a state. They don't believe they deserve to exist.
Well, I assume when Russia started this that their goal was to take over the whole thing. I just right. They were going to.
They thought it was going to be easy.
Right, they did. I know. Well, everyone else thought that it would be easy for them too. So then, what on their side? How come for lack of a forgive me, how come they fucked this up?
Well, for one thing, one of the things that the The Russians did not prepare, obviously, for a long war.
Right.
Therefore, they did not mobilize their industry. They did not have their logistical systems and supplies built up in order to be able to sustain a long war. They thought it was going to be a short affair, and instead, the Russians historically, as far as their logistics supply system is concerned, they've never been very good at logistics and supply.
Uh-huh.
Conversely, the American army, for most of the 20th century and well into the 21st, obviously, has mastered logistics. We are the best in the world at supplying war and how to get the necessary material to the men and women of our armed forces when and where they need it. And we can do that better than any other nation on the planet. And the Russians are among the worst. And one of the bits of evidence right now is that the Russians, what do you think what kind of vehicles or transport do you think the Russians have now been using in supplying their offensive operations?
Chrysler LeBarons? I don't know.
Donkeys.
Oh, okay.
Okay. During
there's a Chrysler LeBaron.
their supply system is abysmal. It's abysmally primitive and not very reliable. Now, keep a good historical example during the Second World War, when the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa. Now, the Germans, they had mobile forces going into Russia, and the Russian supply forces were mostly horse-drawn wagons. They had very few, if any, trucks.
Unbelievable.
But guess what? The United States during the Second World War, via Lend-Lease, were supplying the Soviet army with Ford trucks. Many Ford trucks. And this was Lend-Lease. Yeah, the Russians never gave any of those trucks back, but they used them for decades after the end of the Second World War. Even in the 21st century, you could still see maybe a few Ford trucks running around because they were extremely well built back then.
Yeah.
And those Ford trucks enabled the Soviet army to sustain its logistical operations when they launched their counteroffensives against the Nazis during the Second World War. In fact, it could be argued very credibly that had it not been for those Ford trucks, the Soviet army would have had a terrible time driving the German army out of the Soviet Union. It would have been done with horse-drawn wagons. Yeah, they could have kept the Germans from advancing any further, but the Germans would have been able to hold out a lot longer on the Eastern Front because of the Soviet army's lack of logistical capability. That's carried over to the present day.
You open the door here, so I have to step through it. So first of all, people should know this, and that is, the Ford Motor Company basically turned over from making cars to making airplanes in something like 2 weeks. Unbelievable. They were making 60 airplanes a day when they'd never made them before. I mean, it was really amazing what happened here. But the other thing is, you as a military historian, you tell me, because I'm fascinated with World War II. What's the deal with Hitler? If he hadn't tried to go into Russia, which was stupid, and not even bothered with Britain, and not even bothered with North Africa, he basically had the entire European continent. He had Germania. He had it. And how come that wasn't good enough? What's going through his mind? Do you have any idea?
He tried to reach out to Great Britain because he considered them felt to be fellow Germanics, and very respectable. And he was offering Churchill guarantees, and one of the retorts of one of the British diplomats was, "Our experience has been that Hitler's guarantees guarantee nothing." And so and Churchill saw Hitler as an unavoidable threat to the safety of peace of Europe and for the world. And so really, when basically Churchill refused Hitler's offers or overtures of peace or security guarantees, he then tried to break the Great Britain by trying to gain air superiority during the Battle of Britain.
Right.
And when Great Britain defeated the Luftwaffe and prevented them from gaining air superiority, then now he was frustrated. Where else could he turn his power? And he was looking towards the east, towards the Soviet Union, for what the Germans call Lebensraum, living space.
Mm-hmm.
And he also perceived the Russian people as Untermenschen, inferior people. Basically, he threw them in along with the Jews. And so he was fatally lured at the success of his military in all of these other campaigns. He thought that the Soviet Union would fall just as easily as had all the other nations.
But Jonathan, the Soviet Union is huge. Physically, it's huge. That's the thing I don't understand. I don't understand how this. I understand they had the best army on earth. I understand that. But how the Germans in their little country could look at this giant, vast expanse of the Soviet Union and say, we can take this. It's like my cat going after a cow,
Yeah. It takes a certain amount of hubris, because the Germans were convinced, the Nazis in particular, were convinced of their own racial superiority.
Uh-huh.
And they thought that the inferior Russians would be easily conquered. And they were what added to that perception was the rather poor Soviet performance in the Russo-Finnish War, 1939-1940, where the Russians took in excess of 200,000 casualties just trying to subdue tiny Finland and force them to cede territory around Leningrad to make it more defensible. And but when Hitler observed that rather poor performance of the Soviet army, he figured, okay, these guys would be easy pickings.
Yeah, interesting.
And the Germans, their best performance was during the first year of their war against the Soviet Union. They were able to conduct major army group drives on 3 separate fronts. Army Group North going toward Leningrad, Army Group Center going toward Moscow, and Army Group South going toward Stalingrad, or in the Caucasus. And that first year, that was the only year that they were able to do that. They took sufficient casualties, and they were advanced so far that in 1942, they could only conduct a major offensive on one sector of the front. And they chose Stalingrad, the Caucasus, to get the oil fields, supposedly.
And then they got really unlucky with the weather too.
Yes, they did. But all of that was logistic. The German logistic system, even though it was better than the Russians, it wasn't that much better.
Oh,
it was not that much better. They relied a lot on horse-drawn wagons too, as well.
I didn't know that.
They were only 10% of the German army was motorized going into the Soviet Union. Most of those German divisions walked into.
Yeah, I knew that, but I didn't know they had such a lack of mechanics. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was the American army that when we came into the war, the American army was near 100% motorized.
Yeah,
that's how we were able to drive across France in our counteroffensive a lot faster than the Germans advanced in 1940.
Huh. Okay, so let's get back to. Thank you for indulging me on that, because I find that just the whole thing totally fascinating. I still, first of all, just to sum that up, and you would know better than anybody. I'm told by people who know about this that we are lucky as hell to win World War II. It's like
we had to. I think it was Otto von Bismarck back in 1870 had been the chancellor. Says there is a providence which looks out for children, drunkards, and the United States of America.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. I'm going to remember that.
But the fascinating thing is that, and there is a certain truth to that, because we regard ourselves as one nation under God.
Yeah.
We are very friendly to Christianity and Judaism by extension, and therefore, I would argue as a Christian that we have gained the blessing of God on our nation for our 250 years of existence.
Yes.
Not because we are all Christians, we are not all Christians, but there is a sufficient number of Christians that live in the United States that are willing to pray for this country, to live good Christian lives, and to continually pray for the success and welfare of this country, that we have in effect gained God's blessing.
I would also argue.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would also argue that this nation was started with the most noble of intentions too. I don't think that's hurt either.
No. Is that in the Constitution it says that we are endowed by human rights come from God.
Right.
That is our assertion. It does.
Right.
They do not come from the state.
No.
They do not come from any other source other than from God.
Yeah, and politically, that was a radical concept at that time.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was, and it still is.
Yes, it still is. Right.
Because we are still we are the only constitutional republic in the world.
Yes,
we are not a democracy.
Right.
That's one big misunderstanding. It was we have to safeguard democracy.
Oh,
no.
I hear that one more time, I'm going to shoot myself. It's unbelievable. Just shut up.
Yeah. The founding fathers feared democracy because they said it would lead to the tyranny of the majority. And that's why the founding fathers put in that system of checks and balances, the electoral college, and these other things designed to prevent, as James Madison put it, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. Right. And you see it at work even in the current Trump administration. Ambition checks ambition, and it works slowly. President Trump is making the current administration work more effectively than any administration, obviously, of the 21st century and for much of the 20th century, I would say. Yeah. So he has, and they have, and because of the rise of Marxist socialist candidates, the Democratic Party is in very great danger of triggering a massive backlash in the upcoming midterm elections.
Yes, they are.
If they do that, then what you could see is a backlash which will guarantee a large Republican majority in the House of Representatives, a larger majority in the Senate, and possibly if one or more of those liberal justices on the Supreme Court gets really discouraged and says, "Oh, heck with this, I'm retiring," you could have a 7-2 conservative majority on the Supreme Court. And you would have an era of conservative Republican political dominance that will extend well into the second half of the 21st century.
Oh, Jonathan, I've been predicting this for a while. I think what's going to happen here is what happened with Democrats with their 40-year run from roughly, I think the same thing, except for the Republicans this time. I think we're going to have a 25 to 40-year run. That's what I think. Yeah.
You may well see, and here's what I said, which really kind of irritated some people at my church. I said, well, you better watch it. One of the things you better watch it, or I might pray again before the next election, because then we'll have 4 years of Trump will be followed by 8 years of Vance, followed by 8 years of DeSantis, and then eventually in 2038, Barron Trump's going to run for president.
Right.
And long before Barron Trump looks like he could pull it off in 2038.
Yeah, he probably could.
He could be 38 years old. He'd be one of the youngest presidents, and he could do it. And Democrats by that time are going to be hating life so much.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So when we close here, do you want to make a prediction of what actually is? First of all, will we end up with this war over after these meetings? Do you think so or not?
I hesitate because if they manage to put this complex mechanism in place and somehow manage to persuade, or at least on the surface persuade Vladimir Putin to accept it, and we get a temporary ceasefire, I predicted there will be a very fragile ceasefire. It's going to be a very fragile pause. Vladimir Putin is going to be watching very carefully for our political will and our will to reinforce or invoke sanctions. And if he perceives that we don't have the will to oppose him, He will violate that ceasefire and resume offensive operations.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ukrainians are perfectly well aware of this. And so that's why they will be very reluctant to agree to this. Now, President Trump has said it's up to Zelensky to come to an agreement with Vladimir Putin. Well, Zelensky is from my perception of what I've seen, in no mood to agree to a ceasefire for the sake of agreeing to a ceasefire, particularly if he knows that Vladimir Putin is all too eager to violate it.
Yeah, but hold on. I have to ask you, Jonathan, do you think a lot of that, sometimes I think a lot of what Zelensky's saying is just talk for his own people. I don't know if he actually means it as strongly as he's saying it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, based on the fact that the Russians have been continuously attacking, and regardless of any talk to the contrary, every time President Trump offers an overture for peace, Putin responds with more attacks on Ukraine.
Yeah, that's true. I noticed that too.
So again, that's no security guarantee coming from Putin guarantees that he will not violate it in the future.
Right.
He has never shown that history.
All right, let me run one more thing by you. Here's another scenario. Let's say, do you think Ukraine's ultimate security is more or less guaranteed if Putin gets everything he wants?
No. If he gets everything he wants, you have in effect rewarded him for his initial aggression to start with, and that will simply set the stage for another follow-on war against you to take the rest of Ukraine.
Okay.
And he will do it, and he will do this for as long as he is alive.
Well, do you think he'd go anywhere else? Like if he gets Donetsk and Crimea, and people wipe their hands off? Do you think
he has been making his living and his name off of warfare for virtually his entire tenure as president?
Yes.
There is nothing to suggest in his pattern of behavior that he is suddenly going to, find Jesus or say, I see the error of my ways. I shall now be peaceful from now on. He's not going to do an overnight conversion like Ebenezer Scrooge.
And he's about 74. Is he 74 years old?
He's about 74. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So no, he's not going to make it. No, he's not going to change.
And he's not going to change at this point. And basically, he must be, as Winston Churchill said, the only thing that Russia respects is strength. They have nothing, they can respect nothing more than strength. And there is nothing that they have more contempt for than weakness, particularly military weakness. Churchill said this decades ago in the 20th century. And this is something that, a lesson that many Europeans remember, and many Europeans are thinking about that now, which is why they are reluctant to sign on to a negotiated peace, which is not properly backed up with a combination of economic measures, sanctions, threat of sanctions, as well as the continued military reinforcement of Ukraine. So any peace that relies upon the goodwill of Vladimir Putin is a fragile and very short-lived peace.
Jonathan, we'll have you or some of the guys back here in a couple of weeks, after my vacation.
I shall carry your message of invitation to them.
Please do that. Please. I can't thank you enough. Your insights are all just pristine. They're fantastic.
Well, they're also hard. They're also hard won.
Yeah. You've put in your time. Yeah. So thank you. I'm going to let you go. Okay.
Okay, great.
You take care. All right. We'll see you soon.
You do the same. Thank you.
Bye. Jonathan Lockwood. He's written 2 books on military strategy, and he's a former U.S. Army colonel, and he's an all-around good guy and smart as hell. Nice to talk to him. Always get one real incredible insight, and now I can't remember what it was, but he had one. Yeah, I can't remember. I don't know. Roll the tape back and you'll find it. All right, part 2 here. It's a Jimcast. I talk about the stuff no one else talks about in the news. And the first thing, speaking of whether I asked Jonathan whether he thought flat out Vladimir Putin was crazy, I got a theme going here, and so I want to tell you about it. I'm going to give you 3 stories, and then we're going to link them all together. First story, this is on the New York Post. Headline is Deranged Woman Arrested After Threatening to Sacrificially Kill President Trump in Unhinged Social Media Posts. Now, this woman, I think she's from Kentucky, if I'm right, she went to Washington, D.C., and she's been posting online that she's going to kill the president and that he deserved to be killed and that somebody has to do it, and it's going to be her. So she went to Washington, D.C., and the FBI found her and interviewed her. They interrogated her. And they let her go. They decided she was not that bad, not really a threat. And then the next day, she ends up in a protest for one of the things about the National Guard coming to D.C. She's in the protest, and apparently she did rough up some. If I'm right, she roughed up some National Guard people or something, and they dragged her in again and talked to her again. And she told them again, yeah, she's going to kill the president. And that time, they arrested her. So she's in jail now, but the point here is she's completely unhinged. I mean, it's like this. She's 50 years old. You know, she's basically, you know, she's like some Kentucky housewife, and I have no idea whether she had the means or the ability to kill the president. Probably not, but she certainly wanted to. Okay, there's that. So now here's the other thing. This is also from the New York Post. Headline: Brooklyn politicians call for active war on the feds, a pathetic new low in NYC politics. So this is the city council of it sounds like something out of a what's the Borat movie. The city council of Brooklyn has declared war on the United States of America. And the way they've done this, or their actual strategy here, their tactic, is to cut off the power to 26 Federal Plaza in Brooklyn. I'm talking about the electrical power. They're going to they want to isolate the building, basically, because the Brooklyn politicians want New York to declare war on the U.S. government by turning off the power to 26 Federal Plaza. They claim it's the only way to counter the, quote, soft launch of a fascist regime. They've decided that Donald Trump is fascist, and their solution to this is to declare war on the United States. That's the Brooklyn City Council. And then finally, and this sounds like it's not related, but really related. But bear with me for a second here. Ex-girlfriend uses glitter to help former farmer boyfriend. She ruins his car. And what she does is she pours salt into the vehicle's engine. She put glitter in the AC vents, and she slashed the tires. She cracked the windshield and a rearview mirror, and she shattered the radio screen on the inside. And that was enough to declare the car totally totaled. We don't know what she's upset about. This is her ex-boyfriend. She took a fabulous mugshot. It's terrific. She looks great. And so why am I mentioning all this stuff in a row? What ties all this stuff together? Crazy people. I've talked about this before. I'm starting to think. Well, not starting, because there's actual polling actually indicates this. The last poll that was taken about a month ago determined, and I think it was Rasmussen, determined that 1/3 of the American adult public is classified as mentally ill. 1/3, 1 out of every 3 people. And I've been on this since the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and I've said this several times. This woman named Emma Jo Morris, she's a columnist for somebody, the Federalist, I can't remember. She went to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and she's sitting there, and she's a conservative woman, and she said it suddenly occurred to her that this was not a political problem. This was not conservatives versus liberals, Republicans versus Democrats. It occurred to her that the problem is all the people in this giant ballroom with her were all completely nuts. They were crazy. And she wasn't talking about haha crazy. She meant really actually mentally ill. And I'm starting to think that there's something to this. As and Jonathan alluded to this about the fact that the Democrats, since the election and even before, when they thought they were going to win, and they actually did, which I find amazing. I mean, I predicted the election outcome almost perfectly, and I had other people on this show who did the same thing. It's like I think if you were an astute observer, it was pretty obvious they were going to lose. But since then, all they've done is just they keep floating stuff that's completely absurd, and now they've got this Mamdani guy in New York City, and here where I'm in Minneapolis, we have a Somali guy running for mayor who makes Mamdani look like a child. I mean, this guy, they're both flat out communists, and they won't use that term, but Mamdani has said straight out that the ultimate goal is to seize the method of productivity, which is literally a communist manifesto, literally. So now I would say that communism is crazy because historically it's obviously doesn't work, but that's not really the crazy stuff here. I mean, you have Democrats who basically oppose anything that Trump wants to do, including like clean up crime, which you would think that's a pretty obvious thing, that people like that. They don't want crime in their city. They don't want crime in the neighborhood. And then it's just, I mean, Trump has basically been trolling these people for months, if not years. He gets them to say the most ridiculous stuff. And I come to the conclusion that it's beyond politics. I don't think this actually has anything to do with politics. I think a lot of these people are actually mentally disturbed. Yes, I don't know what you do about it. I don't. And you can tell me if I'm crazy or not. We don't have the phone lines open. We are opening the phone lines on Wednesday all night long. You can call up, but it's just it's crazy. Now, speaking of crazy, all right, there's a lot of I got to bring this up because a lot of people think this woman's crazy. But over the last week, two congressmen from the U.S. House of Representatives, Anna Paulina Luna, who, if I'm right, represents Florida, and Eric Burlison, who I think represents Kentucky, but I'm not sure. They have both gone on podcasts and saying they have personally seen proof of the fact that extraterrestrials are coming to Earth. They have not seen it firsthand themselves. They said, both of them said, I've never seen a UFO. I've never seen a flying saucer. I've never seen an alien spacecraft. I've never seen alien bodies. But they say they've seen photos of that stuff, and they talked to enough people to convince them the fact that this stuff actually exists. Now, both of them, especially Representative Luna, and I don't know if that's because she's a woman, I have no idea, but both these people have been raked over the coals for this. And the primary thing people are saying is, well, where's the proof? But the problem is they can't present the proof. I mentioned this, I've talked about this previously. This is the closest any government officials in the United States have ever come to what's called disclosure, and that is officially telling the American public that the aliens are real. But they can't, there's no evidence because they can't present it. They're under security oaths. And what I said in the description for the show tonight is that this is the closest any of these people have ever come to violating their security oaths. As a matter of fact, in the case of Representative Luna, there's a possibility she actually crossed the line. But are they going to arrest a sitting congressperson? And you're going to laugh at me now. Are they going to kill her? Supposedly people have been killed over this stuff. And no one really knows why, though the reasons could be numerous. One is money. I mean, you're talking about companies, private companies, not the government, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, who have technology that is years and years ahead of what we have developed here on Earth, and is probably worth billions, if not trillions of dollars. I mean, the power systems to these extraterrestrial craft alone would probably completely negate the entire petroleum structure on the planet. I mean, you wouldn't be done with it, overnight, but you'd be done with it in 6 months. And how many people would that put out of work? 20, 50, 100 million people worldwide. I mean, I think there's 10 million people in the United States alone who are employed with drilling for petroleum. 10 million people. I think that's the last I heard anyway. So you got that. Then you got the fact that supposedly, and this is another thing, son, I've never claimed to actually know this. I have claimed the fact that I've been saying since this show started, so I've been doing this for years, that the extraterrestrials are real and they're coming here. But beyond that, there's a lot of stuff I don't know for a fact. And one is that the extraterrestrials have told the governments of the world not to announce this. There's that too. Now, I want to bring something up here, because this is also talking about like proof that this exists. Both Chaim Eshed, who's the father and up until recently was the head of the Israeli space program, and oh God, I'm not going to forget his name, the former defense minister of Canada, who passed away about 3 or 4 years ago. Both of those people said this was all true. And Eshed is saying that both the government of Israel and the government of the United States, he knows for a fact, have been in touch with extraterrestrials. He has said this. He's a single most, you think he's 82 or 83 years old. And I think he is retired now, but he retired relatively recently. He's the single most important person and in the space program of Israel. And they do have one, by the way. And one of the noted premier physicists in that country. And he has said this. He says he knows this for a fact. And what is the name of? God, I don't believe it. I don't believe I screwed up on this. The name of the defense minister, Paul Hellyer. That's his name. Paul Hellyer was the former defense minister of Canada. And before he passed away, he said the same thing. Now, these are two very important. These are both basically the highest ranked government individuals on the planet who have said this. So they both said it. Now you have Representative Luna and Burleson say, Luna said she's seen pictures of alien bodies. She said photos. She said that. And she also said she's seen photos of the spacecrafts too. So, and the things they're being laughed at, people are making fun of this. But like I said, once again, the reason they're making fun of this, where's the proof? Where's the proof? At this point, I don't think there's anything that they could actually present that would prove, even if they brought out one of those spacecraft and had people, well, you can stand 6 feet away, but you look at it, I don't think people would believe it. I know I've said this previously because of the way now with AI, if you took a picture of a gray alien walking toward you, and you actually took that, and that really happened, no one would believe it. They think it was all just gussied up AI. That's what they think. So unfortunately now, all this stuff has been rendered moot. If you brought one of those spacecraft into a hangar and let the press come look at it, they'd say it was a dummy. People would say it was dummied up. There's nothing basically. There's a certain number of people who refuse to believe this. No matter how much proof you give them, they're never going to believe it. Unless, I suppose, and this is what a lot of people are looking for, they want the president of the United States at a podium saying that we have proof that aliens exist. And I'm making a prediction. I made this prediction previously on the show. I think that in December of 28, the last month of Trump's term, he's going to do this, because I think he wants the credit for being able to tell the world this is going on. Because it will be an earth-shaking event. It will, and I think his ego is big enough so that I think he wants to do that. But I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, that's my problem with this, is that people are making fun of these people for talking about this. They are really, literally risking their legal lives, if not their physical, actual lives, talking about this. They can't produce the proof, because it's literally illegal for them to do so. So the fact they're even talking about this is really incredible. So at any rate, I will leave it at that. And speaking of AI, Jeffrey Hinton, who's been called the godfather of AI, he used to work at Google on Google AI. He is saying, I don't know about this. He says that we should allow AI to take care of humans the way humans take care of children. That's what he has said. So, because he said very quickly, I mean, within 2 years now, AI is going to be smarter than any human on the planet. And he says that instead of trying to fight this or trying to control it, we should literally just let them control us and make certain that they're programmed to be benevolent. That's what he thinks. I don't know, folks. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea. But anyway, I'm relaying that to you. That's what that's how he thinks we should deal with this. Today, I'm fascinated with the media. Today, MSNBC rebranded as MS Now. They have to because Comcast is cutting them off of NBC and putting them in a new separate company called Versant, and they had to rebrand. Well, this is really interesting. People did notice this. CNBC, the business channel of NBC, they are also being cut off from NBC, but they are not rebranding. They are going to be CNBC. Now, the really interesting thing about that, though, what you won't read anywhere, but this is true because I know this because I was around 150 years ago, and that is they back engineered the acronym for CNBC when the channel started. It stands for Consumer News Business Network. That's what Consumer News Business Channel. That's what CNBC supposedly stands for. And I think that's their justification for leaving it that way. There's never MSNBC stands for Microsoft National Broadcasting Company. That's what it stands for. It was a combination effort between Microsoft and NBC and started in 1996 to start a news channel. That's where that comes from. Microsoft bailed like 5 years later. They got out, but they've kept that ever since. And now that was what I find really goofy about this. They kept the MS part, which stands for nothing. And a lot of people brought up today, well, yeah, it stands for multiple sclerosis. And I never thought of that, but yeah, it does. Because it doesn't stand for anything else. That's a real weird thing about this. You'd think they kind of keep the NBC part, but no, they already got rid of. If I were them, I would have dumped the whole thing altogether, come up with something else. But no, they kept the MS part, which has not been applicable for like 25 years. So okay, so now they have back engineered their acronym. So apparently, it stands for My Source. I got to get this right. My Source of News, Opinion, and the World. That's apparently what MS Now stands for. I don't know. Yes. Well, I mean, they had to do something. I suppose it's not that bad, but MS stands for multiple sclerosis. Jesus, what are you thinking? And then along with that, speaking of MSNBC or MS Now or whatever the hell you want to call it, I don't know if they actually made the actual transition today or not. And the other thing too, one more before you get off this, the logo is really weird. It's like it looks really, really lame. It looks like a little, I don't know, like a little bookmark or something. I don't know what the hell. They can't use the peacock anymore. And actually, CNBC can't either. They left the CNBC acronym, but they can't use the peacock because they're no longer part of actually what's NBC. But the logo is kind of just dorky too. Nicole Wallace claimed that Trump doesn't give a shit about democracy. That's what she said, talking about this meeting with Putin. And the reason I brought this up, and I have to tread very lightly here because this is all third-hand information. So I want to tell you this is my opinion. This is speculative, and don't necessarily believe what I'm going to tell you because I don't know if it's true. But I've said this on this program previously. I have people who have told me that Nicole Wallace doesn't believe a single thing she says on television. She's doing it strictly for the paycheck, and she doesn't believe any of it. That she just doesn't buy it at all. But she just says stuff to fit in and collect her $5 million, and she's doing it to put her kids through college. That's what I've been told. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I could do that, especially if she's doing that. She's doing a really good job because I watched her. I got to admit, I've looked for the tells of line. I can't really see them, or many of them anyway. If that's true, I have to give her credit for doing such a good job at it. But man, that'd be tough. You go into work every day and you have to talk about stuff you actually don't believe at all. She was I think she's still, no, she claimed to be, she was a Republican up until about a month before I think October of last year, when she said she changed her, she couldn't deal with Trump being president again, so she changed her affiliation. And the other things too, and God knows I know a lot of people like this. She might still be a conservative and hate Trump. I mean, I know quite a few people in my orbit who are staunch Republicans who hate Trump's guts. So there's that too. But anyway, I'm throwing that out there. Like I said, I have no confirmation of this. I have no way of knowing this firsthand. So I just find it kind of fascinating if it's true that I've been told that that's the case. So once again, that's not firsthand information. I just want to point that out here. The Kodak company's going broke. They might go bankrupt. They might go out of business. So George Eastman invented the Brownie camera in like 1890 or something like that. The first portable camera that people could take places. And they made, for years and years and years, they dominated film photography in the United States in every way. They did film for the movie studios. They did everything. And then the real amazing thing is, in 1975, they invented the digital camera. That's true. They held the patents for the original digital camera, and they decided not to pursue it because they thought it would cut into their film business. And well, the rest of the world cut into their film business, so they are out of the film business. I think they have some processing centers, but I don't think they actually make film anymore. It's a kind of a sad story, and it's really goes to show it's about the satiety and incompetence of executives. People get too big for their britches and they can't imagine anything going wrong. We used to talk about this at Calling News on the podcast all the time, about the fact that you look at the history of the Roman Empire. 2,000 years they dominated the whole planet, and so you've seen this has gone on for 2,000 years. Why would it quit? Why would it stop now? Well, it did. It finally stopped, and you're thinking the people at the end are probably just shocked. Really, 2,000 years and we screwed this up? Or even like Jonathan was talking about the fall of the Soviet Union, that lasted what, 80 years? But I don't think anybody there expected that was going to happen. And I know that the United States, we were kind of planning and working toward that, but even here, we thought there was another 20 or 30 years to go, and no, 1992, they were done, So you got this giant company, really, really did some really incredible things. All right, so let me run another idea by you too. I don't know if it's possible for a business in the United States to last much more than 100 years. It seems like that. Look at Sears. Sears should have been Amazon. They did the same thing, actually. They did not pursue online shopping because they didn't think they needed it. And at the time, you could probably argue they didn't. They didn't need it. But man, did that catch up with them quick. They are, for all practical purposes, out of business. I mean, not technically they aren't. I think there's still like, what are there, 40 Sears stores in the entire country now? There were like 7,000 or something like that. So they are technically still in business, but no, that's going to end, And so they've been around about 120 years, I think. IBM's been around for about 120 years, if I'm right. They're doing okay. I don't understand why. Because I don't think anybody actually understands what they do, and they're basically a giant consulting firm now. But is it possible for a company to last more than 120 years? I don't know. I mean, our country's only 250 years old, and other than some small mom and pop operations that go back to colonial times, it still exists. Major companies, no, doesn't seem possible. Doesn't. I just want to point out to you folks, there's a rumor going around online that there's somebody trapped in the giant silver bean in Grant Park in Chicago, and that's not true. But the amazing thing is all the people online who think it is. Because the thing is, well, okay, that sculpture's 21 years old, and supposedly they're saying there's some guy been trapped in there for 21 years. How? And how does he get water, and how does he get food? And it's like, what are you? So this gets back to what I've come full circle now. Gets back to what I was talking about. The people are nuts. People are crazy. This is I don't know if that's stupidity is that is so much as craziness. It's like, no, there's nobody in there. That's not gonna, and here's the deal. But those same people look at me and say, well, you're the guys talking about the fact that ET's coming to Earth. Yep, I am. You know why? ET is coming to Earth. I do not care what you have to say about this, whether you think I'm nuts or not. It's true. Okay. I don't know that I don't like I said, I've made no attempt to answer the questions of who, why, where, and how, and all that sort of stuff. But no, they're coming. They've been. I don't even won't even venture to guess how long they've been coming. It's obvious at least 70 years. Some people think they've been coming for millennia. I don't know about that either. I don't know. But yeah, so yeah, I know. I understand that those same people who I'm calling nuts are calling me nuts. But that problem is it's very simple. I'm right and they're wrong. That's all there is to it. And the Vikings cheerleaders, the Minnesota Vikings hired 2 male cheerleaders. Now, and I got to talk about this because, well, first of all, I'm here in Minneapolis, so it's our wonderful team that's never won a Super Bowl. We and the Bills are the only people who lost four Super Bowls and never won. The problem with the Vikings cheerleaders, and no one's really no people pointed this out, but no one. Yeah, everything online is just either or. There's no subtlety to anything. Yes, there have been cheerleaders. There's plenty of colleges that have male cheerleaders, and there's even supposedly 12 NFL teams have already had male cheerleaders. That's not the problem here. The problem here is these 2 male cheerleaders are basically acting like women. That's the possible. They're not tossers. They're not catchers. They're not callers. They're not doing any of the traditional stuff that traditionally male cheerleaders have done. They're doing the female routines in the same manner of the women, and they're in the female cheer line. That's the problem. And I have to say this: I have a lot of gay friends, and I know people are going to hate me. I don't care. I, along with a whole bunch of people in America, are tired of looking at effeminate men. We're tired of it. I don't have a problem with male cheerleaders. I don't have a problem with it at all. I have a problem with male cheerleaders acting like women. That's my problem, and I think but no one's really talked about this. But I think that's the problem here in this case too. And also, it's been plainly obvious that these 2 men are basically. I don't know if they've been instructed, but they have acquiesced to acting like women. They do the same routines. And this really bothers me. One of those 2 male cheerleaders is now the lead cheerleader of the squad, if I'm right. And I thought, God, how could you, brand new person? And it's like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't. If I was a female on that cheer squad, that's what would actually bother me about the fact that this guy just came on and he's the head cheerleader. It's like, no, that's actually the problem. The problem isn't that they're males. The problem is that they're men acting like women. And I got them in. I'm tired of watching it. I am totally. And finally, you might have seen this in the news because I think Gutfeld did a story on this, but I've had this on the outline on the rundown here before they did. Guy in Britain who has apparently medically confirmed the world's largest penis broke his arm because he fell in the shower because he couldn't see what he was doing because his penis was in the way. There you go. Quality programming. You just saw it right there. That's what we got going on here, folks. Yep. Fell in the shower. Couldn't see the soap on the bottom of the shower because his dongle was in the way. He couldn't see it. It was in the way. Fell in the shower. Hurt himself. He says it's not as it's not all it's cracked up to be, and I bet he's right. I bet it isn't. I've never. So I don't know who, like some British medical journal or something confirmed this, but there's a plaster cast of this guy's penis in some museum, I think in Portugal or something like that. I don't know. Oh, God bless you, my friend. That's it. I'm done. All right, folks. So tomorrow night, Sal Litvak is coming on. He was on the show about 3 months ago, if I'm right. And he's the producer and director of the movie Guns and Moses. It's gotten fantastic reviews and also got really good crowds when it was in the theaters, but it got pulled because it's a tiny little independent film. And was it Universal needed? Is it Universal that put out the Superman movie? They needed screens, so they're relaunching them. The movie's going back in theaters. I think it's September 7th, if I'm right. So Hal's going to come back on. We were trying to get the whole cast, or at least some cast members of the movie, to join him, but we failed in that effort, which is a reason it's been relatively late to announce this. But yeah, so Sal's going to be on tomorrow, and Wednesday, Larry Newman, a Bigfoot investigator friend, bail bondsman extraordinaire. He will tell us about all the people who's chased after the country of Skip Bail, and he'll tell us about chasing after Bigfoot too. That's what you get here. You're not going to find this on the Today Show. You aren't. Dylan Dwyer looks fantastic, but no, they're not going to talk about Bigfoot, and they're not going to talk about the guy with the world's largest penis either. They're not going to talk about any of that stuff. I'm Jim Peters. I do this show. It's called Jim Peters at Night. I love doing it. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for listening. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are. And good night to you, wherever you may be. I'll see you tomorrow night, everybody. 9 p.m. Eastern. Take care.